They say land is just dirt and wood until someone fights for it. But where I come from, land carries bloodlines, footprints, promises. I didn't come back to Red Cedar Ridge for justice. I came back for silence, for the sound of pine trees. Not courtrooms. For the last years of my father's life. For healing. But silence doesn't last long when greed finds its way up the mountain. What started as a broken mailbox and a forged letter became something else entirely. A scheme, dressed as a community. A war waged in fine print and fake rules. They thought no one would fight back. They thought they were clever. But they forgot the most dangerous thing you can do in a place like this: underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. The wind always carried something different at Red Cedar Ridge. Sometimes pine, sometimes smoke from a neighbor's chimney. That morning, it was silence, clean, simple, undisturbed. Ethan Grant stood barefoot on the cabin porch, hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. The lake shimmered like a sheet of brushed glass. The water still as the breath of dawn. For the first time in months, he felt calm, whole. This place had always done that. The cabin wasn't much by modern standards: hand-hewn beams, stone fireplace, creaky floorboards that echoed with memory. But it had been built by his grandfather. And before that, it was land where his great-grandfather once trapped during the Depression. It wasn't just a home, it was heritage. A quiet defiance against the world's rush to modernize everything sacred into something sellable. Ethan had come back here to start over, after 17 years in federal service, as a cybercrimes investigator. A bullet through the thigh and a mistake that cost a rookie his life sent him spiraling. He took early retirement. His mother passed a month later. His father, battling early signs of dementia, refused to leave the ridge. So Ethan came home. He traded his badge for firewood and silence. And for the most part, he didn't miss the job. Not the noise, not the politics, not the cold gray buildings where you spent your life putting pieces together just for someone else to sweep them away. Here, there were no secrets, just pine and snow and stillness. At least, until that Thursday morning, he heard the diesel engines before he saw them, a low growl climbing the gravel road, wheels grinding on frostbitten earth. Then, two SUVs, shiny, black, far too polished for a logging trail. Behind them, a white pickup with surveying equipment and two men in hard hats. Ethan set his mug down. The SUVs pulled up right in front of his porch like they owned the place. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out, blonde, pressed blazer, crisp white trousers that didn't belong anywhere near dirt. She looked around with a proprietary air, as if cataloging something she already considered hers. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked, his voice low but firm. She smiled, like a real estate billboard. "Mr. Grant, I presume." "That's right. I'm Veronica Langford, president of the Red Cedar Ridge Community Development Association." "Never heard of it," Ethan said flatly. "Oh, it's quite new. We were ratified last month, formed by unanimous consent of all current residents. Or, at least, those who matter." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "This is unincorporated land. We don't have an HOA. Correction," she replied sweetly, holding up a leather folder. "We didn't. But under Colorado's revised Residential Ordinance Act, small communities may organize improvement initiatives to protect neighborhood standards. Your parcel, being visible from the lakeshore, now falls under our oversight." She handed him a notice. It was professionally printed, complete with a Red Cedar Ridge Association seal and a stamped signature from someone listed as Zoning Advisor, Commission Office. "Your structure," she continued, gesturing to the cabin, "has been identified as non-compliant. Rustic architecture is encouraged. But this," she sniffed, "this is deterioration, non-uniform paneling, exposed plumbing under the porch, moss on visible roofing." Ethan stared at her. "You came out here because my roof has moss," she smiled tighter. "Let's just say, we're aligning vision. Our investor partners have big plans for this region. Investor partners. Phase 1 involves lakefront refinement, walking paths, cabins redesigned into short-term luxury experiences. There's even discussion of a wellness retreat. Ethan took a step closer, folding the notice. This is private property. I own it. Title goes back 91 years. And we respect that, she said, as if he'd just complimented her shoes. But your property now falls within the development's visibility zone. That means it impacts value for neighboring parcels, which means it must meet aesthetic compliance. She turned to the men in hard hats. Begin topographic imaging. We'll catalog existing conditions for the preliminary redesign overlay. Ethan's voice turned sharp. Take one step toward this porch, and you'll be trespassing. One of the workers hesitated, looking between Ethan and Veronica. Veronica's smile didn't falter. Mr. Grant, we're happy to file the necessary violation reports, but I'd rather not escalate. Let's be reasonable. Ethan didn't blink. Lady, I was a federal investigator for almost 2 decades. I've put people away for a lot less than this. There was a pause. Brief. Telling. Then Veronica tilted her head. Well, then I guess we'll make sure everything's by the book. She signaled the team to stand down, then turned toward her SUV. You'll be receiving a formal demolition recommendation within the week. Enjoy the rest of your solitude. The convoy reversed back down the road, tires crunching cold dirt, leaving behind a haze of dust and a single piece of paper clutched in Ethan's hand. But that wasn't what he focused on. It was the phrase she'd used. We'll make sure everything's by the book. That wasn't a retreat. That was a threat. And Ethan Grant had spent his entire career reading between the lines. For the next 48 hours, Ethan barely slept. What began as suspicion quickly unraveled into something much deeper and uglier. The demolition recommendation arrived on Saturday morning just as Veronica promised. Except this time, it came via courier in a sleek black envelope, complete with a letterhead from the Red Cedar Ridge Community Development Association and a seal from the County Planning Office. The document accused Ethan of multiple violations, improper drainage compliance, outdated structural materials, and obstruction of future community easement. There was one small problem. None of it was true, and Ethan knew exactly how to find out who was lying. He drove to the county clerk's office in Helena with a burner phone and a duffel bag full of old deeds, tax records, and satellite images. For years, this is what he did for a living: catch fraud. His instincts didn't rust. They sharpened the moment they smelled corruption. When he arrived, he didn't ask for permits. He asked for names. And one kept coming up. Lane Merritt, county commissioner, elected 3 years ago on a clean development platform. Ethan found his name on every recent land initiative, every zoning reclassification, every public good declaration affecting Red Cedar Ridge. One name, and behind him, a paper trail of shadow LLCs, land trusts, and investment partners, including something called West Pine Holdings, registered out of Texas. Then Ethan found something worse. The HOA itself, the one Veronica so proudly chaired, hadn't been approved through a community vote. It had been quietly registered as a neighborhood preservation committee under an obscure clause of county code, requiring only 3 signatures: Veronica Langford, Lane Merritt, and a man named Jordan Feist. Feist was listed as environmental consultant, but when Ethan ran his name through an old FBI database, he got a hit. Feist had been investigated 6 years ago for involvement in a shell game scheme involving rural land acquisitions in northern Idaho. Never charged. Case dropped due to lack of victim cooperation. Classic tactic: intimidate quietly, acquire cheaply. They were doing it again. On his way out of the clerk's office, Ethan ran into someone he didn't expect: Alyssa Tran, a former investigative reporter turned part-time librarian in Red Cedar. She had been let go from the local paper months earlier, after editorial disagreements over development coverage. "I heard about your cabin," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "You're not the first." She opened her messenger bag and pulled out a file already labeled Langford. Inside were photos, receipts, emails, proof of HOA violations that mysteriously appeared after residents refused to sell. Most of those residents had since moved or gone silent. "This isn't about aesthetics," she said. "It's about a land grab. With legal polish." Ethan stared at her. "You want in?" Alyssa raised an eyebrow. "I never got out." Back at the ridge, they began documenting everything. The creek behind Ethan's cabin, now listed as pending public access trail. The mineral rights under neighboring lots quietly transferred to West Pine Holdings, and the residents being targeted elderly, widowed, or out-of-state property owners unable to attend surprise HOA hearings. The most chilling discovery came from a recorded conversation Alyssa obtained from a former HOA assistant. In it, Veronica can be heard saying, "The old man's place is perfect. Sentimental attachment always drops the asking price. We just need to tighten the screws." Ethan recognized the voice. They were talking about his father, his cabin. His mother's grave sat 30 feet from that porch. That night, he called Alyssa and said, "We're going on offense." They sent formal inquiries to the state zoning board, initiated FOIA requests on all HOA filings, and filed injunctions on easement enforcement, all designed to slow the process, force public attention, and buy time. But they knew what would come next, and it came faster than expected. On Tuesday, Ethan returned from town to find his front gate broken, his mailbox ripped from its post, and a notice duct taped to the front door. Final opportunity for voluntary relocation. Deadline 72 hours. Inside. The fireplace had been tampered with. Gas valve turned open. His father, thankfully, hadn't been home. But the message was clear. This wasn't just about laws anymore. It was about fear. Ethan sat on the edge of the dock that night, alone, looking out at the lake his grandfather had taught him to fish on. He could still hear his dad's words from years ago, the thing about land. "Son, it doesn't just belong to you. You belong to it, too." They weren't just trying to steal acreage. They were trying to erase history. And he was done letting them write the ending. The final straw didn't come with a bang. It came in a manila envelope, slid under Ethan's door in the middle of the night. Inside was a brochure, matte finish, corporate, perfect, with mock-ups of a luxury eco-resort called Emerald Waters at Red Cedar. Page 6 showed a redesigned aerial view of the lake, where Ethan's cabin currently stood, a yoga deck, a curated sunset lounge. At the bottom, bolded in gold, scheduled groundbreaking, spring 2025. Investors, West Pine Holdings. Commissioner Lane Merritt. Veronica Langford. Stapled behind the brochure was a single note, typed in 12-point times New Roman. "You've made your point. Now take the buyout before we stop offering." Ethan didn't flinch. By then, he had everything he needed. That week, the mountain stirred. At the local Grange Hall, 27 residents, many of them previously silent, met for what Ethan and Alyssa quietly called the fire circle. Everyone brought something: emails, fake citations, pictures of damaged property. One man had a video of a bulldozer tearing down his neighbor's boathouse days before the permit was even issued. Then came Martha Kilpatrick, a retired schoolteacher whose land backed into Ethan's. "They fined me $800 for wind chimes," she said, voice shaking. Said it violated auditory tranquility standards. "But I wasn't afraid until last week, when someone let my dog out in the middle of the night." By the end of the meeting, there were enough sworn statements, proof of intimidation, and recorded HOA overreach to form a legal dossier. But Ethan didn't want to go through Lane's corrupted local court system. He wanted to cut the rot out at its source. So he made a call to an old friend from the DOJ. Operation Redwood was born. Over the next 5 days, Alyssa leaked carefully chosen pieces to state reporters. A forged demolition order, signed on a Sunday when offices were closed. A zoning map draft, predating the HOA vote. The brochure, showing construction plans for properties still legally occupied. The spark caught. Local headlines turned national. Whistleblower alleges land grab scheme in Colorado mountain community. HOA, or organized harassment prosecutor, turned retiree fights back. Suddenly, Veronica and Lane were no longer just bullies in a small pond. They were fish in a spotlighted tank, and desperate fish get sloppy. That Friday night, Ethan parked his old Toyota in front of the cabin and left every light on, a decoy, inside the tree line. Beneath a veil of pine and moonlight, he and 4 neighbors waited with thermal scopes and battery-powered cameras. Alyssa live-streamed quietly on a private channel, one that multiple newsrooms were already monitoring. 147. A Goy. Headlights pierced the dark. 2 unmarked trucks crept up the gravel road. One man jumped out with bolt cutters and approached the gate. Another headed toward the gas main. And then she stepped out. Veronica Langford, in a black North Face jacket and heels entirely inappropriate for forest soil. She paced the porch, phone in hand, whispering, "Get it done. I want it all down by morning. Blame it on an electrical short." That was the cue. The LED floodlights snapped on. 30 residents emerged. Phones raised. One man had a drone. Another, Martha's son, had a boom mic. Behind them, a Channel 7 news van lit up the tree line. Veronica froze like a cornered animal. "Smile for the press," Ethan said, stepping forward. "You're live." Commissioner Lane Merritt arrived moments later in his SUV, only to find the road blocked by 3 resident-owned trucks and a retired firefighter with crossed arms. Lane tried to back out, only to be cut off by a state trooper cruiser pulling in behind him. "Don't move." The trooper barked. "FBI's on their way." Veronica tried to spin the story. It was a safety check, spontaneous code enforcement. But the footage told the truth. The gas can, the bolt cutters, the whispered threats, and the paperwork already with the state attorney general. By Monday, both Veronica and Lane were in custody, charged with fraud, conspiracy, coercion, attempted arson, and misuse of public office. West Pine Holdings distanced itself publicly, but their accounts were frozen within the week. The entire Emerald Waters project was shut down indefinitely. Ethan refused every interview request. "I'm not the story," he told Alyssa. "The community is." 3 months later, the cabin stood untouched. The HOA was dissolved. Red Cedar Ridge residents voted unanimously to establish a cooperative, not a governing body, but a voluntary neighborhood forum focused on real maintenance, not aesthetics or punishment. Alyssa went back to journalism now with her own independent outlet. Martha rehung her wind chimes. Ethan rebuilt the old fire pit out front. His father, now moved in permanently, lit the first log with a trembling but proud hand. "You didn't just save the land," the old man said. "You saved its soul."